Pay no attention.
Already now?
He's trying to torment you.
Okay, so we're talking about leaving La Panne.
Okay, the way I remember the story, the way it was told to me by Bob, is that when this exodus from Antwerp happened, and all the people were flooding into La Panne from Antwerp, among those people were also my uncle, Jankele, and his family, which included the two children, David and Tsili, who were still alive, and his parents-in-law that had two very old people who had come out from Germany, who had fled from Germany a year before. And when he saw us preparing to leave with his taxi driver, he broke down and cried because he said, what's going to happen with me? He had tried to put his family and his baggage on a wheelbarrow to also walk towards Calais, but he said he couldn't. It was too, he broke down and cried and said, I'm not a horse, I can't do this. So my father had pity on him and said, okay. He talked to the taxi driver and arranged with the taxi driver that he would go to Calais with one part of the family and come back and take the other part of the family. Now before my father left, he had given the taxi driver a camera, radio, all the sugar, all the food that was left in the house, everything, just to make sure that he stuck with him. And I remember the going to Calais. I was 5 years old and I remember it. So in this taxi was my mother, my maternal grandmother, and me, and this aunt with her two children, Tsili and David, and her two old parents. So the plan was that we go to Calais, the taxi driver leave us there at the railway station. We wait there until my father, my three sisters, and whoever else
and
comes.
the Monheids come.
The Monheids,
yeah.
whatever. I know only about my family, okay, with my uncle. And we ended up at the we arrived at the French border. It was evening. They didn't let us through. So we had to sleep there. Part of them slept in the taxi. The driver went out of the taxi. There was a pub. He stopped near a pub. So he went into the pub, took me with him, arranged two chairs, one across the other, put me to sleep on the two chairs, and he slept in another chair. And that night, Calais was bombarded by the Germans. But the next morning, we drove into Calais.
So it's a good thing it was closed, because otherwise you would have been there when it was
there when it was bombarded. I remember driving into Calais, getting out of the taxi on the street with glass all over, seeing windows shattered and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, he took us to the railway station, dropped us off there with our pekkele and left to go back to La Panne to pick up the rest of the family. And my mother, she had luggage with her. Most probably she had the luggage from this Monheit that I never knew anything about. This is a new story. She had these carpets and all this stuff from the Monheit. She gave it into the railway station to, where you give your luggage in to check in, for to hold. And she had these tickets. You get a ticket for each parcel.
Claim baggage.
Huh?
Baggage claim.
Baggage claim, exactly. So night came. She looked for a place to sleep. She found some stall. How do you say stall?
Oh.
Barn. Where they rented us a barn where we could sleep. She went out and she got food. And we ate, and she waited, and every day she went back to the railway station to wait for my father and my sisters to come.
For us.
And they didn't show up. In the meantime, she was seeing Jews arriving in Calais, seeing Jews come from Antwerp, people that she knew, and she would say, where, what, when, she wanted to know what's going on. Had anybody seen? Nobody had seen my father. Then she started noticing that people were going to the port. People that got a goy with a wheelbarrow, taking them to the port. So she says, where are you going? We're going to the port. She didn't know what was at the port. She didn't know anything. She got a goy with a wheelbarrow. She put everybody on. She put as many pekkele as she could on the wheelbarrow. And we went to the port. For some reason or other, my mother had in her bag, in her handbag, she had a large handbag, where she carried all kinds of stuff. A bread, some sugar, my grandmother had had a petticoat with a big pocket that was always closed with a safety pin. In that pocket she had her passport, she had her money, she had some sugar, she had some candies, who knows what else.
And they had a bottle of wine between
Oh,
them.
hold on a second.
Oh.
And in my mother's handbag, she had a bottle of wine, red wine. Why she had a bottle of wine there, I don't know. But she must have had a reason. These people were used to a war from 1918. They knew what it meant to smuggle, to flee, to bribe people. So they had this knowledge in them, okay? She had this bottle of wine that she had carried, it was most probably still from Antwerp. When we arrived at the port, she saw people were being taken onto a tanker, an oil tanker. We were being hauled up through the portholes. There was no gangplank. You had to get up onto a car, and from the roof of the car you were hauled up through a porthole. So everybody was pushing and shoving, everybody wanted to get on. So she took out this bottle of wine, showed it to one of the sailors, one of the guys that was helping people up, and we were next in line. So we got onto this tanker, not knowing where it was going, you know, where we were going to end up, but we knew that we were fleeing. We were the original boat people. And this boat crossed the channel from Calais to Southampton, which is the smallest point between, the shortest point between England and France, between England and the European continent. It took us 3 days and 3 nights with bombardments, you know, the Germans bombarding the channel with mines exploding.
In the water?
In the water, yeah. Yeah, because they had mined, the Germans had mined the channel, okay, so there were a lot of ships trying to get across.
The army was retreating, the English army and the French army was retreating back to England.
So it was pure luck that you got across?
Yes, it was pure luck.
You know, and my mother, she said, it takes so long. Oh, she said, she thought maybe they'll get to the United States. You know, yeah, she thought, "Hoe kan America?" I mean, because, I mean, to be
3 days and 3 nights.
3 days and 3 nights, you know, then it was a long 3 days and 3 nights for them, I'm sure.
Yeah,
as opposed to a hovercraft now, which takes half an hour.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the ship was full, there was no sanitation, and it was a tanker. It was not equipped for passengers. There was no food. Luckily, my mother had this bread in her bag, my grandmother had this sugar, you know, so she would dole it out. People had diarrhea on the ship, and everything was overflowing. I mean, it was incredible.
If you have seen the Exodus movie, it was out, you know, it reminded me of, I mean, I wasn't there, but it gave me a picture of
what the trip was like. But what happened, we ended up in Southampton, and the English were there, received us with open arms. They, of course, we were checked medically, this, that, and the other, and we were all divided in different villages, given room and board, shelter, food.
Who put you up?
The English authorities.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, they
They organized help for, we
They
were
put you in
refugees.
Jewish communities, or
Huh?
in a Jewish community?
No, it was not a Jewish community. No, we were in a place
was
called, I forgot, I'll remember. Mitcham, Surrey. And
Is that a city?
I think it's a village in Surrey.
How many people were on this tanker, do you know?
No, I haven't the faintest idea. And we were given houses. I don't know, they had empty houses. Like, we got a room, and this aunt,
Tante Lottie with...
Tante Lottie with David and Silly and her 2 old parents, they got a room, and then we all shared a kitchen. On Sundays they would take the children out and entertain them. They make a tea party and things like that. They took us to a church, and they wanted us to pray. And then when I came home and I told my mother they took us to the church and we had to kneel, she didn't let me go anymore. You know, things like that. But there, I don't know how, she had an address in Paris. This you'll know better. To write to in case we got separated, Papa had given her an address in Paris, so that if we got separated, she would write to that address and he would write to that address, And like,
Parents.
this is the story that I heard. And also through the Red Cross, they were able to get, they were able to be in
Yeah.
touch. So they knew where they were. Like my mother knew where my father was, my father knew where my mother was.
Oh,
we
something
were.
else we were talking about, you know, where the merchandise, the diamonds that you know, that Mama had everything.
She had everything?
She had everything.
You didn't have? I thought it was all divided.
No, it wasn't divided. In the beginning, you know, when I was put on that buggy with the
Yeah.
horse, Papa had given me a little zekkele. But Papa had mostly the raw diamonds, not the polished diamonds. And this he gave to Mama. You keep it. This was most of his stuff. And she took it, she had it with her. So when we were separated, Papa was left with practically nothing as far as money is concerned, or money, but value. He had, you know, nothing really valuables to.
You didn't have any geschliffene schoenen? Polished merchandise?
Very little. It was half. See, it was half geschliffen. It was half geschnitten.
Oh,
it wasn't.
It was in
wasn't
the works.
finished.
It had been in the works. Yeah.
It wasn't finished completely. So, Mama had everything. So when they got to, eventually when you got to London, what did she do? And she needed money. First of all, I think she got a job. I mean, you know better.
She didn't. Yeah, she didn't need money. She worked, and she
She
also
worked.
got aid from the Polish
Oh,
government.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And whatever the merchandise she had, she saved. And not only that, but she saved money, and she bought more
More.
merchandise.
That after the war, that she would be able to. But in the meantime, we were left. Papa was left without anything, and it took us from the day the Germans came in until we moved. We were allowed to move to Brussels. We were not allowed to move. This is also a chapter on its own. You know, it's such a conflict. Do you remember when we had a full house? This was before the Germans came in. The Belgians were still, you know, at night with
Patrolling.
the blackouts, patrolling to watch whether there are spies. It so happened that, you know, the lights were off, but between so many people, we had candles, and somebody put a candle on a window, and one of the Belgian soldiers saw this, and they came banging at our door to ask questions. And he saw all these people and all these children there in this apartment, with geschliffen, you know, sleeping on the floor, on the bed, I mean, wherever there was room. And he accused us of being spies, because there was a light, you know, and this was, La Panne was at the coast, and things were going bad for Belgium. The Germans were coming closer and closer. So Papa had such a hard time convincing these two Belgian soldiers that it was an honest mistake, that we are not spies. We don't mean to bring in the Germans. In the contrary, he had a very hard time it was a horrible night at the time, that night. And then when the bombs were coming closer and closer and closer, yeah, see, I didn't tell you how it happened. When the taxi left that day, I don't know whether it was a Monday or Tuesday, I don't remember. And we waited and waited and waited, and, you know, the first day we knew he wouldn't come back. We waited, you know, the second day everybody got up early, we got dressed and we prepared food, sandwiches, so when the taxi comes we should be able to. We waited till noon, it was already evening, it was already midnight. No taxi, no driver, Gurnisht. And we heard on the radio things were going bad. So the following day, this Mrs. Schiffman said, we have to eat. First of all, you know, we have to eat, whatever will happen. So I'll never forget, she took potatoes and whatever was left, you know, in our place, and she cooked a big pot of soup. We had, and with the hope this driver is gonna come back. He never came back. We never saw him. But what did Silly tell us the story? That he did come back, but on his way back, the Germans took his car away. They were already, you know, this was already 4 or 5 days later. We didn't know what happened to them. And the taxi driver came back by himself and he told us they requisitioned his car and he came back by foot or by bicycle, I don't know. And he told us he left everybody at the train station, and that's all he knew.
So how did you move on?
We didn't.
You stayed?
We couldn't get out of La Panne, we stayed. And Germans came closer and closer, and then we heard that the English and the French are retreating. The beach was full of trucks and food, and see, La Panne is not a port. They had to, the army, they went in with the trucks as far as they could in the water when, you know, when it was ebb and flow, when the water was, what do you call it?
Tide, when the tide
When
was
the
out.
tides, when the tide was out. They drove out with their trucks or the tanks, and they swam to the tanker or the boat that was waiting for them, and this is how the army saved themselves. And we were looking on and see what they went back, and then we were helpless.
Were you hiding when you were in the pub?
No,
The Germans weren't in there.
they weren't there yet, but we knew they were coming. But they left 2 or 4 soldiers, volunteers, and they kept banging with the cannon back. You know, they were keeping as if there was still an army defending La Panne. But there were only either 2 or 4 volunteers that stayed behind. But all night, Friday night, it was bang, bang, bang. We were sitting in the basement. We were 60 people in the basement because the Germans were bombing. And those 4 cannons were, you know, among the 60 people was 1 policeman. He was, you know, he was afraid to go home or whatever, I don't know. And Shabbos morning, all of a sudden, it was quiet, 6 o'clock in the morning. So Papa said, "It's still. He's gonna go up and see what's doing." you know, Papa, the große Held, you know,
hero.
the little hero. And we were afraid, "Papa, don't go, if the Germans are there." So we can't stay, we have to see what goes on. So I think Silly went with him, if I remember. So he goes out and he met up with a German. "Guten Morgen, yeah, guten Morgen, and where are you, where do you live, what do you do?" So he explained that, you know, we live there, and we are 60 people, and what he's doing, oh yeah, he says, the war for Belgium is over, Belgium has been occupied, you have nothing to fear, tell everybody to come up, you know. So Papa came down and he says, "Kinderlich, the war is over for us." So everybody, you know, I mean, the war is over for us, so here we are with the Germans. So anyway, people somehow, you know, you calm down a little bit because the bombs started. You were scared every minute the house is gonna fall apart. So I don't remember who was in the basement with us anymore.
So did you all go up?
So we went back up to our apartment and got organized. Helene and Pinchas had left with Floria. Some people had left and they were caught somewhere else. I don't know their story. but the end of that chapter was that they said, don't worry, we're not going to do anything. Everybody should go back. You live in Antwerp, you go back to Antwerp. They put trucks to our disposal. I mean, we didn't want to go back because we had no home in Antwerp anymore. But the people who wanted to go back, the Germans put them on their trucks, took them back to Antwerp, and they settled back into their homes. And we remained in La Panne with the Monheids. That was Papa and we 3 girls, and the Monheids. And we lived there, and we didn't know. We were still waiting to hear what had happened to them. Nothing. Nicht. So, one day, the Germans come in and they took our names and our, date of birth, where we're from, where we were born, like all this whole group. Yeah, and we moved in with the Monheids. We didn't want to stay in our apartment, so they had a house. We moved in with them. We took whatever, not the furniture, but the necessity, and we cooked together. We slept, in order not to be alone. Because this coward, this Monheid, he said, Mr. Dorf, come live with us. He felt secure as long as, Papa was around. Somehow, Papa was scared, but he had his
wits about him.
Yeah, he knew what to do. So they registered us. Are you Jews? Yes, we're all Jews, and I don't know how it happened. One day.
How long were you there?
I don't know. Papa and Silly and Malvin went to Antwerp, and I stayed behind with the Monheids. And the Germans came. You're Jews? Yes. What is your name? And they had a list. Adelle Dorf, Mr. and Mrs. Monheid, Mrs. Schiffman, the mother. Come on. So we had to go with them. And they took us away. And Papa and Celia Marvin were in Antwerp. And when he heard, somehow he got to know that we were taken by the Germans. I mean, you can...
Where were you taken?
We were taken to a place, all I remember was it was a big hall. There were a lot of German soldiers. And they separated him, they took him separate. And no, I was taken by myself. I don't remember why. Papa and Celia and Malvin were in Antwerp, and I was taken by myself. And I was scared to death. I didn't know where they were going to take me, what was going to happen. I remember getting off a truck to go in to sleep, and up comes to me a young man, and I don't know how he knew that I was Jewish, but he said in Yiddish, he says, like to Saran, put this in the mailbox for me. I saw that he was a Jewish guy, and he gave me a postcard, and he says, if the next opportunity I should put this in the mailbox, this is a card for his parents. And this was Benno Bloem, I found out later. So I was kept 2 or 3 days, and then they sent me back to La Panne.
They didn't do anything to you?
Nothing, no. But in Antwerp, when my father heard that I was taken, it was, I was already sent in Poland. I mean, I was already, people...
Make up stories.
Yeah. So anyway, he came back, and he said, Kinderlach, he said, es ist nicht geht, but what are we gonna do? They have us on the list. So it didn't, and we stayed together, and we were waiting. We were waiting. There was nothing else we could do. A week later, the Germans came again, and they took all of us. When they took all of us, that's when we really, all of us, we were scared. So they took Papa and Mr. Monheit separate, the men separate, and we, the women, separate. You know, the old lady, Mrs. Schiffman, and Monheit, and we 3 girls. And we didn't know where they were taking, and they didn't know what was going to happen to us. And they kept us, I think, for 2 or 3 days. And they put us together to sleep in this big hall with the soldiers, you know, in those army cots and everything. Then they decided, yeah, this Mrs. Monheit, she was a German, she was a born German from Berlin, and she spoke their slang, she spoke their lingo, you know. Somehow she asked what's going on, and where is her husband, and where is the father of those three girls, and all that. So anyway, don't worry, they're safe, they're taken care of and everything. What's going to happen to us? Oh, we're just keeping you for a few days, and then you will be able to go home. So we were sent back home to La Panne, we, the women, you know, with a condition that we have to move away from La Panne and we have to go and live in Brussels. They were afraid of us because being Jews and living on the coastline, that we are going to spy for the... They took all the, not only the Jewish refugees, any refugee that didn't reside in La Panne for X number of years, they had to leave the coast. This was, the whole coast was being cleared. Yeah. So we took a truck with our furniture, and we went to Brussels.
And when did Papa and Monheit come out?
This took a few weeks. And this Mrs. Monheit, she was, I mean, she got into the highest offices, to the highest, with her mouthpiece, you know. The way he was a coward, she was the strong one. So I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, and they were sent into I have pictures from the camp, you know. They were sent to a citadel, to what do you call a citadel?
Fortress.
A fortress, only men, and mostly Jewish men. There were about 40 or 45 men in that group. And she, with her connections or whatever, maybe she bribed them or what, I don't know. But out of the 45 men, 5 people were released, and 2 of them was Bob and this Mr. Monheit.
And what happened to the rest? You don't know?
They were deported.
We never heard.
So this is how you ended up in Brussels?
We ended up in Brussels, and we were allowed to live in Brussels with a condition that every 3rd day we had to go to the commandatur, the head office of the Gestapo, and we had to register that we are still there.
Check in.
We check in every 3rd day, and this was a very bad thing. First of all, Papa couldn't go to, you know, we had no money, he had nothing. And the Germans had said, go back to your business, go back to the diamond business, do what you did till now, you know, just make believe that everything is back to normal.
What year was this?
That was
1940.
That was in 40. Yeah, it was still 1940. So Papa tried to, you know, he had to make some money somehow. I don't know how it happened, but anyway, this is not important. So we moved into Brussels, and every 3rd day we had to
check in.
The 4 of us, we had to get dressed and go up there. So then Papa said he asked permission if we can come every 5 days, because he figured he already had planned that he's not going to stay. We have to get out. He didn't know how yet, but he said, we have to get out, because if something happens, we will be the first ones. You go in, and we won't be able to get out of the building. That's it. So in the meantime, he got to know certain smugglers, certain people who went to Paris. There was still Cuban consulate in Paris. There was still, I think, the Cuban consulate also had permission to give transit visas to people who wanted to go to Cuba with and they could get a transit visa to cross, to cross from France into Spain, and then from Spain go to Cuba. So somehow Papa bought, this was all for money, he bought a Cuban visa with a Spanish transit visa on a false passport, on a passport that was that belonged to Tante Rosie, Regine's mother, a Polish passport.
Polish or German?
No, a Polish.
How come he didn't have a passport?
Who needed a passport before the war in Belgium? Who traveled? I mean, Papa wasn't. He wasn't a Belgian citizen. He was a Fremdeling. If you were born in Belgium, automatically at 16 or at 18 you became a Belgian citizen. But
until then, you had your parents' nationality, and my parents didn't have a nationality. They were
they called them
stateless.
Stateless, and they never had a passport. So anyway, they took Tante Rosie's passport. They took off her picture, put my father's picture on it, put our paper with our 3 names. Silly. They made us all 2 years younger than we actually were, and with this passport, we started out. But before that, we had 5 days. So I mean, it was what Papa did. When you think about it, we were able to sell our furniture to get money.
How did you have furniture in Brussels?
They
moved it from La Panne.
From La Panne. We had
Don't go into detail.
a bedroom, a living room, a dining room, furniture, kitchen, everything, utensils, silver, or feather beds, or whatever we could pack. We packed it and we shipped it.
By train to
By
Paris?
train to Nice.
To Nice.
To Nice. So he said like this: if it'll arrive, it's good, and if it won't arrive, but at least everything arrived. Like my grandmother's silver sticks, the candlesticks that
my mother's candlesticks.
Whatever we had, the feathers, the pillows, the linen, the towels, everything arrived in Nice. It was
miraculous.
Really miraculous. But the biggest miracle was how we got out of Belgium. See, you needed to go from Belgium from Belgium to go to Paris. You needed to cross one border, the German, and then from Paris to go to unoccupied France, to Nice. There was another border.
At that time, Paris was already occupied by the Germans.
Yeah. And
but Nice,
south of France.
South of France was like a neutral zone or something. I don't know exactly, all the history exactly.
Yeah, the government was
neutral.
It was still neutral.
The Vichy government was there, so it was neutral.
Yeah. So for money, I don't know how Papa made these arrangements. Tilly was the first one to be shipped with a family to Nice. First Tilly left, so I was left with Malvin and Papa and Uncle Freum. Oh, Uncle Freum was with us.
And what about the...
What?
What about Mr.
Monheids?
The Monheids, he was a coward. When we went to... Papa mentioned to him, Mr. Monheid, I want you to know that we are leaving. So he says, are you in German? Sind Sie verrückt? Mr. Dorf, you're crazy. You're going to smuggle yourself with 3 girls. You're going to put their life in jeopardy and your life. And so Papa said, how do you translate? You remember what he said? He says, Liebe a gewisse Rettung wie a sichere Tod.
In his heart, he knows.
No,
No.
he said, I would rather have a possible, to be, maybe be saved, rather than have a sure death.
Sure death. Staying here for sure, zoekt hij,
Is sure death.
is sure death. There's a chance that I'll get through. You know, he had all his papers and this and that, and you know, he had made a little bit money in the meantime. You know, so that's when we got each a little peckle of diamonds in case if we get
Separated.
yeah. So we went to the we had to check in with the Germans. And
On the 5th day.
On the first of the 5th day,
Okay.
or on the second of the 5th day, we went to check in. That means that if they would start looking for us, you know, they wouldn't look
Right away.
right away.
It would take them 5 days to find you.
Yeah. So we crossed the border. So we were hidden in it was all paid for, in the restaurant, you know,
Of the train.
on the train, under
Underneath
the bar.
the bar.
Underneath the bar, you know, the
Cupboards.
the
Cupboards
cupboards.
under the
I
bar.
was here and Papa was up there and Malvin was somewhere else. And the train came to a halt at the border. The Germans came up. You know, this wanted the drink and this wanted a beer and you know, and whoever
You're
was
sitting there under the
underneath,
bar.
you can imagine. I was sitting crouched like I can't do it now, but like this for 20 minutes. You know, crouched like this with your,
Knees.
and you know your feet get
Numb.
Pins and
precise
needles.
numb. It was
Pins and
terrible.
needles, yeah.
Pins and needles. So, and your heart. But anyway, the train started to move. 5 minutes later, the guy came and opened up. You know, I couldn't stand up.
Because you were stiff.
I
You
fell
fell
over.
over.
Because I couldn't stand up. But anyway, this was one border and the train took us to, and Uncle Freund was somewhere else. So anyway, we got to Paris. We got to Paris, and in Paris we had to wait 10 days for the smuggler to come back from Nice because he was busy taking another group. You know, he took 10 people at the time.
Where was Tilly in the meantime?
Tilly was
waiting
already,
for you in
Tilly
Paris
was
or in
already
Nice?
in Nice.
She was
Tilly-
already in Nice.
She
Yeah.
went through the train already before you.
Yeah, she went with a family called Schmalz. Yeah. So he actually, it's through this Mr. Schmalz that Papa got to know.
connection.
Yeah, yeah. So Tilly was there, and so we checked into a hotel in Paris, and we had to wait 10 days for this guy to come back and pick us up. And this was already beginning September. It was Rosh Hashanah. Okay, you know, you want to eat. We were eating bread and
So
grapes
you've
and
now been
bread.
separated for 4 months.
What?
We
It's
were
now 4
separated.
months since
Yeah.
you left.
That was 4 months.
Late, yeah, sure. We didn't know what had happened. We gave up. We figured, yeah, when people came back from Calais, you know, to Antwerp, and Papa always asked, did you see my wife? Did you see where? You know, nobody knew what happened to them. They only told us who got killed when the train station got bombed. You know, the Manderer got killed, and so and so got killed. Mrs. Dorf, nobody knew where she. We didn't know that she was across the channel. So anyway, it was it was Rosh Hashanah or whatever. It was Shabbos. So we figured, and there were Jewish restaurants in Paris. So we found out where there was a Jewish restaurant. Let's go and let's have a meal, because we in a hotel we couldn't cook or anything. So we go to a Jewish restaurant. Paul is falling asleep, and we come in. We open the door, and everybody is standing like this with their hands up. And the French wasn't the Germans. The French police was asking papers. Freud was the last one to come in. When he saw what's happened, he made a turn and went, flew down the stairs and finished. We were left, Malvin and me and Bob. What do you do? I said to Papa, so wo steht man mit der Steindler? I was afraid, He says, Kinderlach, do you see there's a door there? He right away somehow assessed the situation. He says there's a door there, and Dutton, I think this is the kitchen. Maybe you can sneak out. Because see, the French, I don't know, there were 2 or 3 policemen, and they were busy asking questions. So we kind of went behind them. We got to this door, to this kitchen door, and we asked, does this lead out? And these were Jewish people who had a restaurant. Yes, we go there and there and there. So when I went down the stairs and Marvin went down the stairs and Papa saw that that's when he left too. So and we had made up, we were gonna meet down in the nearest subway. So we went down the subway, and that's where we found Uncle Froyam. And we looked at each other. We were as white as, we looked like ghosts. I don't know how I got down the stairs. Nobody knows how we got down the stairs. So we were afraid that we were being followed. So at every stop, or every second stop, we changed trains. It took us 2 hours to get back to our hotels until we settled down. You can imagine, if we would have been caught, would be the end of it. If just one of us would have been caught.
Because you were there illegally.
Sure, we were illegal with a...
How did you know they weren't going to turn you in from the hotel or any? Were they Jewish people who had the hotel?
No, see, with the hotel it was all paid for.
Oh,
The guy, the smuggler, he had made the arrangement with the owner of the hotel. This was his business, and it was all paid for. So we didn't move. Mind you, Malvin moved and Froyam moved. That's a different story. You know that story? There was a curfew. You couldn't be out on the street after 9 o'clock from the French. But Froyam had a friend living there and there in Paris, and he wanted to go and visit him. He says, Malvin, come with me. So Malvin says, okay. But on the way back, they couldn't make connections with the subway, and it was already after 9 o'clock. And they were caught. And where are your papers? Where are you going? Who are you? Anyway, it was, Malvin said, she begged and she kissed and she did anything. Please let us go. We only have 2 or 3 blocks to walk. Anyway, I don't remember the details from that story, but they came. Froyam was half dead. Such a stupid thing to do. After what we went through already. After that, nobody moved. We waited. The guy came. He took us. We picked up some more people. We were 4, and there were another 6 people. And he took us to a train, and he took us to the next border. I don't know how many hours by train we went. And he let us off. I think we had to jump off the train. The train slowed down, and we had to kind of. It was a very tricky thing, but the end was that we had to wait. We waited until the guy. See, we could see the Germans, you know, the border. We could see the Germans going up and down. So he said, when they change guards, that's when we're gonna go. So we walked for 2 hours through the bushes, 10 people, until we came to a little village, and he put us up there for the night. So there was one big bed, like this, not a king size, but you know, and we lay down on the bed, on the floor, and we had to wait 2 days in that place until we could continue. So what do you do about food? So there were chickens there, you know. So Papa asked for a knife. He knew how to shech the chicken. So he shech the chicken, and we, you know, we had to eat whatever, kosher, nicht kosher, but wat gekocht. They gave us a pot, and we ate. They gave us bread, and then this guy took us to Nice. Once we were in Nice, it was like an open world. The lights were on, people were coming and going, but we were there illegally. We couldn't we couldn't check into a hotel. Once we were in Nice, we were on our own.
How did you find Silly?
This Mr. Schmaltz, Papa knew the address from the hotel in Negresco was the hotel. He lived in the Negresco hotel, but we couldn't, for some reason, I don't remember the reason why, whether it was too expensive or what, but we couldn't stay in Nice. So somebody told us that there is it's like a sanatorium or a recuperating home, and there 2 women ran it on a hill, and they took us in for money. They knew that we were illegal, and we had to wait in Nice in order to get Sortie de France.
Exit.
An exit.
Visa, an exit
but
visa.
how can we get an exit visa if we never came in legally? So there was a young woman there who had connections with the police, with the supervisor, and for money, she says, it'll take 2 days, 3 days until she'll arrange. It took 6 weeks. And in the meantime, when you're young, we didn't know what he was going through. He knew we knew it was a false passport. If, you know, what if anyway, finally after 6 weeks, he got his passport back for X amount of dollars that he had to pay.
He had given in his passport to get the exit visa.
Yeah, but instead of 2-3 days, it took 6 weeks. So finally, you know, he got his passport back, and we packed up. We got on the train to go to Spain.
And with that, we'll end the session tonight.
The session tonight,
You're
because
getting hoarse.
I'm
Your voice
I'm
is getting
dry.
hoarse.
Yeah.
Hey, just one question. When you started to tell a story much earlier about the Munheitzes packing up the car and everyone going, why didn't you ever get out on that car?
It wasn't a car, Jeff. It was something on 2 wheels.
Cart.
A cart.
That was being pulled by the taxi.
See, we couldn't get on. We were how many people? The Munheits were 3, and we were 4. 3.
Yeah.
And Uncle Jacob was 4. We were 7 people couldn't go on that cart. And there was no doubt that this taxi driver is gonna come back. So we waited.
And in Nice, it was the Vichy government.
Yeah.
But you knew you couldn't stay.
No, because they were there illegally.
We didn't want to stay. We didn't want to stay. There were a lot of Jews there, and they thought that things are gonna remain like this. But Joseph Schmidt, if you've heard the name, Joseph Schmidt was there. I mean,
Famous tenor.
Jewish tenor. I mean, whoever knew opera from before the war. The Schechters were there already.
And at this point, were you hearing about the deportations and the concentration camps?
No.
So you knew nothing?
Ask me how did we find out where where Mama was, and Fay and the rest of the family, we were not allowed to listen to the radio, to the BBC, under the German occupation. But one day, a neighbor walks in Antwerp, you know, where Uncle Marcus lived, and he says, "You know what? I heard from the BBC that there is a Mrs. Dorf and her 5-year-old little girl and her mother are in London, England."
So this was the Red Cross. This
Yeah.
was most probably the Red Cross service. This is how.
Yeah, and we also, somehow through the Red Cross, we let them know that we are alive and well in Belgium. I don't know when Mama got to know where we were, but for 4 or 5 months we didn't know.
So before you left Brussels, you already knew that they were in London.
Yeah, we knew that they were safe in London.
And
Yeah.
you had no idea where they were, Mom?
I don't know what Mom knew or what Mom didn't know. But I know that it didn't take long. It took a few months and she knew where they were.
Yeah, and once we were in Spain, so there was no curve, there was no Germans, there was no nothing. We saw bananas, and I mean it was like a different.
Saw bananas.
Yeah.
How did you finally get from France to Spain?
Tell that in the next chapter.
From France to Spain.
Mhm.
Oh well, we got. See, we had
Yeah,
our
okay.
Cuba. We were going to Cuba, and we had a Spanish transit visa. The boat was going to leave from Barcelona. So from Nice, you know, we took the train. We crossed into Spain. And there, the Spaniards, they didn't look. You have a transit visa. Yeah, you have to get out at this and this date, fine. You're going to Cuba, yes, okay. They didn't look at the passport or at the, you know, they weren't, so we got into Barcelona, we got out, you know, off the train, we go out the gate, you know, where you go out. A guy comes, like a red cap here, comes to us and he says, "Je bent Haït, je komt from Frankrijk, you know, you're Jewish, you come from," yeah, like in Jewish. So we looked at this guy like a Mashiach, you know, how? So he was a porter at the station. He was also a porter in a hotel. And when he brought customers to the hotel, he got a
commission.
sub commission. So we checked into his hotel, you know, and it was 12:30 at night. We were so excited, all of us. We put our luggage down and we went out for a walk on the street. As tired as we were, to be free from the job and to have made it after all the tension. I mean, you know, we girls, you know, but when being a parent, and you know, and I remember how Papa, you see, you know, what he went through. I mean, it must have been very hard on him. So once we were in Spain, that was already a different story. So the next day we went up to the Cuban consulate. You know, we're ready to go to buy tickets. We're going to Cuba. So they said, "Sorry, the last boat left yesterday." That's how we remain in Spain. And that's the end of this session.
So how long did you live in Spain?
We stayed in Spain for close to
13 months.
How much?
13 months, I think.
More.
Or 11 months.
More.
13 months.
More.